Hey folks, welcome to Transplant Helper again today. My name is Jim Merle, and today we're going to be discussing for just a few moments the out-of-pocket cost of transplant. Now, you know as well as I do that the overall transplant cost can be enormous, okay? Basically, whether you're heart, lung, liver, kidney, pancreas, whatever, those costs can go anywhere on the lower end from $400,000 upwards of almost $2 million to have a transplant procedure done. And so obviously, unless you have a very, very wealthy relative willing just to write a check for that, or you're independently wealthy yourself, you're going to need some assistance with that. And primarily that assistance is going to come along the lines of an insurance company, okay? And so one of the things you need to do that's not a part of today's discussion is up front before you even get started. You need to be checking with your insurance company about whether or not they're going to cover your transplant cost, and if so, how they're going to pay that. Because a lot of insurance companies are going to cover that, but at the same time, it's going to be that standard kind of an 80-20 coverage with you having a deductible, co-pays, out-of-pocket expenses to the insurance company that you've really got to know about up front. And let me say in the onset right here, and this is my matter of opinion, you'll probably agree with it, but any hospital who is requiring you to pay them cash up front to be listed for transplant, they're not worth a flip, as we say in the South. I don't think they're worth their salt. I would tuck tail and run and find another transplant center. If all they're worried about is that cash upfront expense being paid up front, maybe as they might excuse it to say, well, that's paying your 20% of the 80-20, forget it, okay? If they're not willing to swallow some of those costs and to cover some of those costs for you and on your behalf, at least in the onset of this, tuck tail and run, okay? Because you do not have to pay your part of it up front in order to get a transplant. I don't care what they're telling you, walk away. Yeah, I get pretty aggravated about that. But essentially, when you get around that and past that, most transplant centers, for example, my transplant center, UAB Hospital, will not ask you for a dime up front to be listed for transplant. But they will, and most will, they will be setting you down for a financial consultation. A social worker type person will sit down with you and have an examination of your finances and try to help you understand the ultimate out-of-pocket cost of transplant. I don't care that my transplant costs $1.4 million, and I don't care, although I'm thankful, that my insurance paid the vast majority of that. What matters to me most, and to you I know, is how much do we pay out of pocket? And there will be some out-of-pocket expense to that. Now, not only your 80-20 and your 20% maybe might come up somewhere down the road, and that could be months and years before that actually comes to haunt you. But what I'm talking about is what the hospitals should be talking to you about, and that is about the cost of living with a transplant, okay? So a transplant center should be saying, look, this is the average amount of money you need to have on hand, tucked away in a sock drawer, buried in the backyard in a jar, put up in the freezer or something before you begin this process. And there's several reasons for that, the most of which really comes down to housing expenses, okay? Many transplant centers, mine did, require that if you live outside of a certain radius from the hospital, that even when you're released from the hospital, you're not going to be, at least in the beginning, able to go all the way home, okay? So I live an hour and 15 minutes from UAB Hospital. They required their patients to come out of hospital and to stay within a 15-minute radius of the hospital. So obviously, I couldn't come all the way home. Obviously, we needed somewhere else to live that was close to the hospital. So that could be, in the most expensive probability of it, probably some hotel or something, paying nightly or weekly. It could come down to renting an apartment, which many times apartments are there available that are kind of tied to the hospital, that are very cheap to get. Could be an apartment like I had, could be a condo that I ultimately got in, which a friend owned. He just kind of loaned it to me for 6 weeks. But you're going to be required more than likely to stay around the hospital for a 6, maybe even up to 12-week period, even if you do well. And so you got to have money for that housing. In addition to that, more obvious and just as obvious to that, you need to be able to eat, okay? Not only do you need food, your caregiver needs food. You need to have the ability to pay for food. Maybe in my case, like I did for my children, for family members that were coming in to visit, just to have something on hand for them to snack on, that type of thing. You have to be able to survive. So you got to keep up with that. You've still got to put clothes on your back. You've still got expenses back home. You've got all of that. In addition to even that, your kind of cost of living expenses, you now have a very special cost of living expense, and you now that you have medication, okay? And most of us pre-transplant had medications, but probably not of the same sort that we're going to have post-transplant. And post-transplant medications, depending on the organ, depending on your insurance, a lot of variables in that, but most post-transplant medications can cost you thousands of dollars per month after transplant. So you got to have money on hand, tucked away, as I said, in the sock drawer or whatever, in order to pay for that. So housing expenses, food expenses, expenses for paying your bills back home, medication expenses. Again, some of us are going to have doctor's copays. You're probably going to be traveling back and forth, even though it's a short travel distance, but going into the clinic over and over and over again. I know for me, for the first 6 weeks, I was in the clinic twice a week, had tons of procedures done once a week, had a heart cath even done every week for 6 weeks. And so there's copays there sometimes. There's expenses. And so you got to be prepared for that. Now, not necessarily pay cash out of pocket out front, but you got to have some money on hand to do that. And so I know some people hear this and they say, well, that proves my point that you've got to be rich to get a transplant. Well, I mean, you've got to be able to have access to money. Let's put it that way. Whether that's through a relative, through your own self and your savings, whether that's through fundraising, that sort of thing. There's several different ways to do that. I've had programs about GoFundMe, which you need to watch before you get into GoFundMe, by the way. There are other programs that might be better for us. But, you've got to have the money. Now, again, I want to remind you, if your hospital, your doctors are saying, you need to pay us this money out of pocket to us, to them, up front, I'd walk away, okay? Personal advice, I'd walk away. But if they're simply encouraging you to be ready to pay for the housing and the food and the medications, yeah, go ahead and do that. Now, once you get over the hump of, say, maybe that first 6 weeks, 12 weeks, obviously, your expenses will go back down. You'll be able to go back home, live in the same place you did before. You'll be able to eat the same type of meals that you did before, probably have access to cooking more and maybe saving some money there. And your insurance is going to really kick in as far as, getting over those deductible humps and starting to pay a little bit better, hopefully. And then more than likely by then, you can already start to access a lot of that assistance that is available with your medications. So don't be too afraid of that, okay? My medications, the first week that I bought them after transplant cost $4,000, okay? $4,000. After that, maybe a month later when I had to buy them again, they were down to $1,000. And they came down from that as I began to find loopholes and ways of paying for them. But anyway, I did want to discuss that with you. Please, the out-of-pocket expenses are real, and you need to head that off at the pass, as we say, and be prepared. I appreciate you joining me today. And by the way, I want to ask you if you would be commenting on this video below. Tell us about your experiences with out-of-pocket costs. Were they severe? What type of money could you expect in your area? Because every area is going to be different. How did you deal with that? How did you come up with that cash? Or did you even try? Tell the truth about it. Comment below. As well as that, if this video has helped you out, or if you liked it, give it a big thumbs up, like the video, and share it out, please, with someone who you know could benefit from this. Again, thank you so much for joining me, folks. I really appreciate each and every one of you who subscribe to this channel and those of you who watch on a regular basis. I love you, and until next time, stay stronger, friends.